Caitlin, I mean, this is fascinating. This has been going on now. Is it clear where Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino, his career is headed tonight?
No, it's not clear, even to White House officials, Anderson, who were texting each other and texting me this morning asking, whether or not they had figured out if he had shown up to work today.
Trump and his administration continue to deal with the MAGA fallout after they refused to release the Epstein files, but that fallout has infiltrated the administration itself. The FBI's deputy director and former right-wing commentator Dan Bongino has been publicly distraught over the betrayal of this administration, threatening even to leave his position with the FBI over it. And as you just heard in that clip, there was so much confusion as to what his status was that White House officials were so desperate that they were texting CNN host Caitlin Collins about his whereabouts. And since then, he has been accounted for.
And of course, he did eventually show up. We were told he had spent the weekend in Florida after not going there on Friday. But when it comes to what you just mentioned there about the relationship being untenable with the White House, he is staying in the job for right now. He is still the deputy director of the FBI right now, and he hasn't resigned or been fired. But the relationship has deteriorated so much that there are officials inside the White House who have not spoken to Dan Bongino in days, even though, of course, the question of whether or not he was still going to be employed by the federal government was still a big one for officials over the weekend. And I was told the president was very angry with Dan Bongino.
So good, I guess, that our deputy FBI director has been found. But the fact that Caitlin Collins was getting texts from the White House about all of this is just an indication of the general dysfunction that this administration is currently experiencing. Of course, dysfunction is inevitable whenever you put YouTubers and Fox News hosts in various very high-ranking positions in our government. But Collins mentioned that Trump was very upset with Bongino. Bongino really at one time believed that Trump was all about transparency. He believed that the administration, of which he is now a part, would usher in truth to the American people. So the withholding of the Epstein files was a breaking point, not just for Bongino, but for a lot of Trump supporters. And Trump is mad at all of them for being disappointed in him. And if that isn't some weird, narcissistic parent type relationship, then I don't know what is. Trump wrote a lengthy post on Truth Social addressing the MAGA response to the Epstein files, and this is after having several negative run-ins with the press in which he essentially scolded his supporters and journalists for asking or even caring about Jeffrey Epstein. So part of the post said this: "Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, and my past supporters have bought into this bull hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years. I have had more success in 6 months than perhaps any president in our country's history, and all these people want to talk about, with strong prodding by the fake news and the success-starved Dems, is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success, because I don't want their support anymore." So he called his own supporters weaklings and said he doesn't want their support anymore. And technically, I guess he doesn't need their support anymore. He's not running for re-election ever again. He doesn't need their votes. He even told them during the last election cycle that he didn't need their votes. But now he doesn't like them anymore and he wants them to know about it. It feels like when you know someone's about to break up with you, so you just do it first to get ahead of things. But his efforts to pin all of this on the radical left are funny, though they are typical. It's always the radical left's fault, whatever it is. Unfortunately for him, this was one issue that sort of aligned the left and the right, at least in the sense that we would all like to see the Epstein files. Maybe we have different expectations as to what will be in them. The left, for example, is not nearly as shocked that Trump and Republicans have chosen not to release the files as the right is. Honestly, it was more shocking that the release of these files was on the table to begin with. But he and Republicans baited MAGA with the possibility of releasing these files and then just left them hanging. And we can't really be surprised that Trump is surprised by the MAGA response to all of this. He is having an uncharacteristically hard time placating his base right now. They usually just take whatever he says and they move on. They usually do as they're told. They rarely argue with any decision that Trump has made. On the contrary, they usually go out of their way to defend him and his decisions. And we are seeing a degree of that for sure, but the talking points from right-wing Trump protectionists aren't quite sticking like they used to, not this time. MAGA has always confounded those of us on the outside of that particular echo chamber. And I'm not suggesting that we're not all in some degree of an echo chamber ourselves. Our lives and even our thoughts, sometimes it feels as like they're being dictated to us via an algorithm these days. But MAGA and the MAGA movement felt like the first time, at least in a long time, that a cult-like group gained significant political and social control here in this country. Usually, movements like this one would have died before they ever had a chance to take widespread hold, but due to a combination of factors, I imagine, MAGA was different. And if you have an unshakable belief, right, a belief that you have accepted in your heart, mind, and soul as unquestionable truth, then that belief becomes the framework upon which you understand everything else. The belief is the part, again, that you do not question. It is your static control variable. But when that existing framework is faulty, then everything that comes from it will be similarly faulty. And that's how you end up with these conspiratorial ways of thinking, because Occam's razor no longer applies. It no longer can apply. And if you've got an unshakable truth that it's false, then truth cannot come from that false belief. For example, that is why most devout Christians don't believe in dinosaurs. They don't think that they're real, and it's why they think that scientists are just fabricating and planting fake dinosaur bones all over the country just to perpetuate their dinosaur myth. And they believe that insane scenario because it's easier for them to believe all of that all of paleontology is a psyop, than it is for them to even consider the possibility that the planet is more than 6,000 years old. To even consider that possibility would mean questioning everything else they believe in relation to the Bible and then their understanding of God and all of life. An arguably less extreme example, is how the absolutely most devout members of Trump's MAGA base can just believe, despite literally seeing evidence of Trump at parties with Epstein, despite hearing him himself speak inappropriately about women and what he likes to do to them and where he likes to grab them. Despite the way he's spoken about his own daughter, despite all of the women over the years, even before he was a politician, who have made horrific accusations against him, despite the crimes that he's actually been convicted of committing, they can more easily believe that it's all just a witch hunt against Donald Trump. He is actually the man on the inside. Had it been Bill Clinton in those pictures with Epstein, well, of course Bill Clinton was there, they would think, because he is a documented perv. But Trump, oh no, he is just trying to shut it all down from the inside. He's basically James Bond, right? All of the documented evidence that Trump is also a perv is just people trying to take him down. But they have to believe that, because even considering that Trump is not the guy they think he is, it would mean that they would have to question things that they are incapable, I wouldn't even say unwilling at this point. They would have to question things that they are no longer capable of questioning. To question Trump's integrity would mean questioning their identities and allegiances for at least the past 10 years. It would mean that they would lose their savior, which would introduce feelings of loss and fear and helplessness that I can't blame them for this, but I feel like they wouldn't be able to cope with that. It would call into question so many other things they denied or explained away over the years. The worst of MAGA, and by worst, I don't mean that they're necessarily bad people. Like, I don't think they're trying to be bad people. I just mean the most indoctrinated, the most committed, the most fervent. They are, at this point, incapable of going down that path. And all that to say, the fact that so many, not all, but a lot in the MAGA camp are now breaking with Trump over these Epstein files. This is wild. When reports started coming out saying that this was going to break MAGA, they were not joking. The question now is whether or not this break can and will be bridged and overcome, or if the schism will prove to be insurmountable for Trump and MAGA. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.